Lost and Found by Katy Haye. What's that dreadful noise? Wulf nudged the bakery door open with a hip, several boxes stacked precariously in his arms, and a sack of flour draped over one shoulder. My singing? Rude! Colm rubbed his hands together to remove the dough sticking to his fingers, and hurried to help Wulf with his delivery. Not your singing. Wulf headed to the pantry with the flour. I heard a cry as I came in, something in distress. Now he'd stopped singing, Colm could hear the noise Wulf meant. His heart spiked in alarm. He set the boxes of fruit and honey on the counter. Is that a cat? Wulf closed the pantry door and turned, brushing his hands off on his trousers. That's not a cat. It's outside. Colm headed towards the door, his heart suddenly noisy in his chest. He pushed open the door Wulf had just stepped through. The volume increased. He turned towards it. Dawn was just starting to break, the air still and shadows sharp. The alley beside the bakery held several bags of rubbish that would be collected later that day. Colm glanced past those. He'd put them outside himself. What was new was a small box marked potatoes. It didn't contain potatoes now. Potatoes didn't produce loud, jarring cries. Colm's heart beat hard, but he was calm as he crouched down. He knew what he was going to find, peering into the box to find a fluffy blanket wrapped around an infant, its face flushed and wrinkled, mouth wide as it wailed. That's a baby. Colm only realised Wulf was standing beside him when his friend spoke. He gathered the baby carefully out of the box, standing up and turning with the infant in his arms. Yeah. He stared, unsure what to do, then shifted his weight, rocking the baby and making shushing noises. The infant didn't seem in a mood to be shushed. His hands tightened, and he realised the back of the bundle was damp. I think it needs changing. Let's get back inside. Wulf plucked a scrap of paper from the folds of the blanket. He unfolded it and followed Colm as he read, Please look after Petal. I can't. The words ringing in his ears, Colm strode to one of the sinks, unwrapping the blanket to reach the baby. Petal. The soft clothes she wore were soaking wet. He nudged the tap with his elbow, starting it running as he eased Petal out of her wet things. She was tiny. Colm didn't have much to do with babies, but the child was barely bigger than his splayed hand. Hey, princess! Wulf was beside him again, his attention on Petal as he bopped her nose with one gentle fingertip. Petal hiccuped, blinking at him and forgetting to cry. She likes you, Colm told him. He caught Wulf's grin from the corner of his eye. What can I say? She has good taste. Colm nudged him out of the way with his hip, checking the water temperature and holding Petal carefully as he washed her under the warm flow. She was well named. Her skin was as soft as the pansy petals he used to garnish some of his cakes. He turned. Can you get me a towel? He gestured, but Wulf was already plucking a soft cloth from the right cupboard. He hadn't realised how familiar his friend was with the bakery kitchen. He wrapped Petal in the towel, patting the tuft of soft hair on her crown. What are we going to dress her in? There's a lost property box in the toilets, under the changing table. I'll see what's there. Colm passed Petal over and hurried through the dark cafe, dodging into the toilets. What had started out as lost property had grown to be more of an essentials exchange as the bakery gained popularity. Parents left clothes when their little ones outgrew them, and others grabbed what they needed if they were caught short. Colm rummaged through the surprisingly full box and surfaced with a clean onesie and a fleecy sleeping bag. They'd do for now. He grabbed a spare diaper from the shelf and hurried back to the kitchen. Between them, they got Petal changed and dressed in her new finery. She frowned, blue eyes blinking up at Colm as though wondering who he was. Wulf leaned against the counter. What are we going to do with her? I have no idea, Colm admitted. I need to open the cafe in, he glanced at the clock, half an hour. And we need to find Petal's mother. I've no idea how to do that. Their eyes locked over Petal's small form. Marbrook Bar, they spoke in unison. Colm nodded, buffeted by an abrupt sense of relief at the thought of the town councillor. She'll know what to do. We'll ask her when she comes for her morning coffee. We just need to entertain Petal until I open. Then she'll take care of it all. He glanced down at the baby, then back to the dough he'd left abandoned on the table. Wulf raised a shoulder and held out his hands. You're my last delivery. I can entertain a baby for half an hour. He took the child out of Colm's arms, which felt oddly empty considering how tiny the baby was and how briefly he'd held her. He washed his hands thoroughly, donned a fresh apron, and finished working the dough, moving on to the pastries that needed finishing so he could pop them in the oven. Wulf paced around the room, crooning to Petal. She'd seemed contented once she was changed, but after a few minutes the baby began to bawl. Wulf winced. Colm blinked, breath stolen. "She's got quite the voice for something so small," he said. Wulf nodded, although Colm wasn't sure whether his friend heard what he said, was lip-reading, or just guessing. He met Colm's gaze with wide eyes. "What's the problem? You've just changed her." "I believe the rule is if you've emptied one end, you need to fill the other. There's milk in the fridge." Right. Wulf dragged a hand through his hair and turned to the fridge. "What do I put it in?" Colm pointed. "There's a bottle or two in that drawer, for my youngest customers." Right. Wulf found a bottle, added some milk and tried to feed the baby. She screamed harder, which Colm was impressed to find was possible. The baby's face was red, while Wulf appeared to have lost all his colour. "Warm it up," Colm recommended. "It should be body temperature." Right. Wulf turned one way, then the other, bottle in one hand, screaming baby in the other, a desperate expression on his face. "Here." Colm ducked past him to select a large mug. He filled it halfway with hot water, took the bottle from Wulf and popped it in. "That'll warm it up. Give it a few minutes." Wulf looked down at the red-faced, O-mouthed baby. "I'm not sure I have a couple of minutes." "Rock her. Sing to her." Wulf looked up. "That's more your thing than mine." Colm rolled his eyes. "You rock, I'll sing." He finished rolling up the last of the pastries and slotted them into the oven, twisting the timer. He started singing as he turned back to the muffins that should have been in the oven 10 minutes ago. Half an hour later, Petal had drunk her milk and was sleeping soundly while Colm loaded the last of the muffins into a basket on the counter. He unlocked the front door and turned the sign to open. The morning rush flooded inside. Wulf sat in the corner with Petal cradled in his arms, while Colm poured tea and coffee and loaded rolls, pastries and muffins onto plates and into to-go bags. Ma Brookbar arrived as the rush was tailing off. "Perfect timing," Colm said in relief as he poured her preferred mocha brew. The head of the town council raised a brow. "We need your help." A second brow joined the action. "You do?" "On the house," Colm said, as he set the mocha and a large chocolate croissant on the counter, which spoke volumes about how desperate he was. "I hardly dare ask what you need," Ma Brookbar stated, slotting her purse back into her bag and reaching for the drink. "We found a baby." Ma Brookbar's eyes narrowed. "Found?" "She was left in a potato crate at the back of the shop. Wulf found her when he made his delivery." He gestured to the corner table where his old friend and the new arrival sat together. Ma Brookbar crooked a finger and headed in that direction. Colm followed helplessly in her wake. "Show me." She stretched her neck as Wulf turned so she could see Petal's peaceful face. Ma Brookbar blew out a breath. "She's a week old, I'd guess, maybe 2. She sighed. "Her mother needs help." "Can you find her?" Colm asked. Petal opened her eyes, looked into Ma Brookbar's face, and began to cry. "Ooh, noisy." She reared back, setting down her breakfast and sitting opposite Wulf. He cuddled Petal close and stroked a soft cheek. "Still, she sounds healthy enough." Which was great, but what do we do? Colm asked. "You look after her. I'll see if I can find the mother." "Look after her?" His heart sank. He'd assumed Ma Brookbar would sweep in and take all their problems away. "I think she needs changing again," Wulf muttered, heading towards the toilets. "That's right." Ma Brookbar's thin lips curved upwards. "You look to have done a great job so far. Carry on." She waved him away. Colm followed Wulf, feeling as deflated as overproved dough. Petal was already changed, Wulf rebuttoning her clothes. His friend straightened. "What do we do?" Since Ma Brookbar hadn't solved the matter for them, Colm had no true idea. Look after her. "I can't look after her. I've got a cafe to run." He cast a hand around the busy interior, as though Wulf couldn't see for himself. His friend looked equally aghast. "I need to get home to sleep. I've been awake 20 hours. A thought pinged like an oven alarm in Colm's head. "Babies mostly sleep, don't they? Put her in a crib next to your bed. You can pass her off to me once the cafe closes." "I don't have a crib," Wulf pointed out. Colm glanced at the door. "That potato box worked fine." "What if she needs feeding?" "Then feed her. You managed it before. I'll give you some milk." He headed to the fridge, as though if he just kept moving, everything would fall out the way it should. Wulf looked at the baby, his expression softening. "Yeah, okay, that could work." By the time he left, Petal's potato box was filled with towels, bottles, milk, and another change of clothes. Petal was sleeping once more, while Wulf looked half asleep himself. Colm added a bag of bakery treats so Wulf had some snacks for himself and almost pushed his friend out of the door. "I'll see you at 5, he promised. Wulf nodded. "And Ma Brookbar will probably find the mother by tomorrow." Closing the door, Colm turned back, surveying the interior of the cafe. Customers were chatting while they enjoyed their food and drink. He nodded in satisfaction and hurried through to the kitchen. The bell would alert him to new customers, and he wanted to get a start on tomorrow's prep. Petal might spend most of her time sleeping, but he was sure he'd be glad for anything he could get ready now. When he heard the back door open at 5, Colm felt a sense of smug satisfaction. He hurried to let Wulf in. Pastry was made and chilled, ready to be worked into shape. 3 separate bowls of dough were rising slowly in the fridge, and dry ingredients for muffins and scones were measured out, ready to be mixed. Really, having a baby to look after was the perfect prompt to make his business streamlined and slick. He'd be able to rest while he looked after Petal. He might even manage to risk a lie-in in the morning. He was grinning as he swung the door wide, only for the expression to freeze when he caught sight of Wulf. His friend's hair stood on end, while his eyes were dark-circled. His clothes were rumpled, and Colm would never say so out loud, but his friend smelled. Sweat and sour milk, it wasn't a great combination. Colm's eyes dipped automatically, half afraid of the state he'd find Petal in. The baby was wrapped in a cosy blanket and sleeping peacefully, rosebud mouth pursed and eyelashes fanned across smooth, plump cheeks. He looked back at Wulf's face. "What happened?" "She doesn't sleep." Wulf half staggered into the room and leaned heavily against the counter. Colm glanced at the slumbering babe. "What do you mean she doesn't sleep? She's sleeping right now." Wulf nodded. It looked slightly as though his head had come loose from his neck. "You've got maybe 20 minutes left. Then she'll be awake for an hour. Then she'll sleep for an hour at most. And on and on. I haven't slept. I didn't even manage a shower, and your pastries are all I've had to eat all day." Colm's mouth opened, then closed again. How could that be right? Babies mostly slept. Everyone knew that. But Wulf wasn't usually prone to exaggeration, and something had happened to make him look as though he'd spent the day wading through a war zone. He swallowed, abruptly glad to his boots for his preparations. "Right. Well, I'll take her now, and we'll see how we get on. You—" He fell silent. Wulf looked as though he desperately needed his bed, but he had deliveries to make. "Do you want to crash here for an hour?" Wulf shook his head as he passed Petal over. "If I sit down, I don't think I'll get up again." He gave a grin that looked forced to Colm's eyes. "I'll be fine." He shuffled back to the door. "I'll see you later," Colm called after him. Wulf raised a hand in farewell without turning. "If we all survive." That was bleak, and unlike Wulf. Colm looked down at Petal's serene face. This was the calm before the storm, apparently, and he'd be a fool if he didn't take Wulf's warning seriously. 17 minutes later, Petal awoke with a snuffle that soon became a cry and then a wail. Colm was beyond glad he'd used the time since Wulf had left to prepare. He took a bottle of milk out of the fridge and set it to warm while he unfastened her wet nappy and cleaned her carefully. By then the milk was warm, so he crooned to the baby while encouraging her to drink. Petal drank half the milk greedily, then spent a few minutes blinking at Colm. She fussed if he stopped moving, but just standing and rocking side to side seemed to be enough. After 20 minutes of that, her eyelids lowered slowly and she slid back into sleep. Colm glanced at the clock. Wulf was spot on with his predictions, and thank heavens his friend had warned him. Thanks to Wulf, he and Petal would be just fine. As the town bells softly chimed 3 in the morning, Colm paced his bedroom floor and realised that he and Petal were not fine, not at all. Actually, scratch that. Petal was fine, which was the most important thing. She was sleeping soundly, looking utterly adorable. He was the one who felt like his eyelids had been lined with sand, and that he was drunk without touching a drop. He desperately needed sleep. But he only had an hour until he needed to get up and start baking. He hadn't slept. Wulf had said Petal only slept for an hour at a time, but he hadn't mentioned that she only slept if Colm was either rocking her or pacing with her in his arms. If he dared to sit down, never mind trying to sleep, she blinked awake and started screaming as though demons were biting her toes. Since he wasn't going to get any sleep, he might as well get started with his baking. In the kitchen, he turned the lights on low and looked around, trying to decide what to do first. His brain felt like it was moving in slow motion. He was definitely going to need the extra time. He glanced down at Petal in his arms. He'd got a head start with preparation earlier, but he still needed both hands to get everything ready. And that wouldn't work while he needed both hands to hold Petal. He pulled a drawer open and pulled out one of the largest cloths he had. Setting the fabric on the work surface, he folded it in half and held Petal to his chest while he wrapped it around himself. "You're alive!" Colm jumped about a foot in the air when Wulf spoke behind him. He spun, heart pounding. "Oh, that's smart!" Wulf came closer, reaching out a hand to stroke Petal's head where it peeped over the sling, keeping her snug against Colm's chest. "I wish I'd thought of that." He looked up. "Did you get any sleep?" Colm reflected that he must look better than he felt if Wulf was asking the question. Wulf looked... Colm tried to be kind, but Wulf was red-eyed and wild-haired. He looked no worse than he had last night, but certainly no better. "No sleep. I feel drunk," he confessed. Wulf nodded. Colm thought his friend was swaying slightly, but perhaps he was the one weaving like a drunkard. Wulf took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll fetch your delivery and then I'll take over." No. Colm couldn't hand Petal over to Wulf when he looked like that and hadn't slept for more than a day. Wulf froze, raising a brow. "The sling seems to work, so why don't I keep her while I'm working? Then I'll hand her over to you when you start work tonight." He frowned. "Can you carry her while you're moving boxes?" "With that sling? Yeah, I'm sure I can manage it." Wulf glanced at Petal, his expression twisting with guilt. "I don't feel like it's fair to ask you to keep her for longer, but I also feel like I'd kill someone for the chance to sleep for an hour or two." Colm nodded. "I have to be awake for the cafe, so you get off and get some sleep. Pick her up before you start work." Wulf nodded, then fetched Colm's 2 sacks of flour and box of sugar and fruit, then left. Colm looked down at Petal with a sense of misgiving. He wished his friend had stayed, but he was the one who'd sent him away. The oven beeped to warn that the muffins were done, just as Petal snuffled awake and started to croak in preparation for a full cry. Colm turned aside so he could pull the muffin trays out without scorching Petal's head, and left them on the counter while he hurried to do a quick change and feed. The croissants, sadly, would have to wait. The queue outside the bakery was grumbling impatiently when Colm unlocked the door, 5 minutes after his usual opening time. The grumbling subsided when customers spotted Petal. His regulars cooed over the sleeping infant while he hurried to put out the last of the pastries and pour coffee. "A new worker?" Kitty Callan joked. "She looks a little short to reach the counter." Colm smiled as he made Kitty's tea and put a muffin in a bag for her. "A guest, not a worker. I wouldn't allow anyone working for me to scream as much as she does." Kitty tutted. "Scream? I don't believe a word of it." "Don't let the pretty face fool you," Colm warned. "She's a tyrant." Johann, beside Kitty in the queue, leaned forward to inspect the baby and venture his opinion. "She's a darling." A timer rang from the kitchen, and Colm remembered the scones still in the oven. He'd only taken a step when Petal blinked her eyes open, saw everyone watching, and screwed up her face with a cry. "Hand her over," Johann prompted. "I just need to get the scones, then I can sort her out." "Hand her over," Johann repeated. "She needs changing," Colm explained. "I can do that." Johann cocked her head towards the toilets. "You have a changing station. I can use it as well as anyone." Petal was really screaming now, while the oven bell was chiming louder than ever, and he was sure he could already smell burning. "I owe you," he said, as he scooped Petal out of the sling and handed her over. Colm rushed into the kitchen, saved the scones from disaster, and grabbed a cup of coffee for himself while he waited for Petal's milk to warm up. When he headed back to the bakery with a basket of scones in one hand and Petal's milk in the other, he found the baby being dandled on Johann's knee as he told her how beautiful she was, aided by coos and agreement from several other regulars. Johann took the bottle and fed Petal while Colm dashed around, clearing discarded dishes from the tables. He had hoped Ma Brookbar would be in early with news of Petal's mother and salvation, but she didn't arrive until nearly closing time, almost colliding at the door with Wulf, who was spruced up and smelled much better in clean clothes with his hair washed and brushed. Petal had spent most of the day being passed from hand to hand in the cafe. Colm felt guilty at how easy he was having it compared to Wulf, but his friend simply smiled at the baby and sat beside Geraldine, who currently had custody of the small bundle. Colm thought she might be teaching the baby how to brew rat poisons, but he wasn't going to interfere when they were clearly bonding beautifully. "Did you find Petal's mother?" he asked when Ma Brookbar reached the counter. Ma Brookbar's mouth pinched and Colm's heart lurched. She can't take the baby back. Not yet. She's not well, poor woman. I hope with medical help she'll be able to cope. But she's barely caring for herself right now. She can't possibly care for a child as well. All the blood drained from Colm's face. So what do we do? Ma Brookbar accepted the cup of tea he pushed across the counter. She looked towards the window where Wulf and Geraldine were heads together, chattering to Petal. I think we keep on as we are. You and Wulf are doing a magnificent job. She reached across the counter and patted his arm. Just keep it up a little longer. Colm nodded. He was probably too tired to be making a rational agreement. But what else could he do? It wasn't as though he and Wulf could abandon Petal. Not now. They were firmly wrapped around her tiny fingers. A week later, Wulf had just arrived at the cafe before closing time to take over Petal's care, if he could wrest her away from Colm's regulars. Colm watched with a smile from behind the counter. Their first 2 days had been dicey, but they'd settled into a routine with Petal, who grew more adorable by the day. Everyone in the cafe helped in some way or another. Some people stayed an extra half-hour to care for her, while Colm and Wulf got a break, while others had dropped off old clothes from their own children, alongside toys and blankets they'd made themselves. While she didn't want to cuddle the child, Ma Brookbar kept an eye on them all every day. Colm was fairly sure she'd have stepped in if they'd truly needed it, although he was glad they'd never put that to the test. The bell over the door chimed, and Colm looked up to see a newcomer hovering in the doorway. The young woman was thin, her skin almost grey, as though she were recovering from a long illness. Colm gave her a welcoming smile. She clearly needed some good food, and she'd come to the right place for that. Good afternoon. What can I get you? He called, making obvious she was welcome, since she half looked as though she might flee. Oh, She sidled inside, glancing at Colm, then at the table where Wulf, Geraldine and Johann were chattering, while Wulf fed Petal her bottle. Pastries are all half price, Colm told her. We're nearly closed, so you'll be doing me a favour, really. If the reluctance was because she feared she lacked the coin for treats, he hoped he'd put her at ease. I just came. Her attention was fixed on Petal as she shuffled further inside. Everything fell into place. Colm rounded the counter, reaching the woman's side in 3 strides. He put an arm carefully around her. You came to see Petal. She bit her lip and nodded. Colm saw tears glittering in her eyes and tightened the arm around her shoulders. Of course you want to see her. Everyone wants to see Petal. She's quite the star of the show around here, you know. Her gaze darted to him, then back to the baby. He escorted her to the table. By then, Wulf and the others had realised something was up. Petal's mother has come to see her daughter, Colm stated. Geraldine blinked. Johann scooted his chair back. Wulf rose steadily. Do you want to take my seat? I'll hand her over. You can finish her feed if you like. The thin woman's throat worked before she spoke. You aren't you angry? Why would we be angry? Wulf asked. She swallowed hard again. Colm saw tears sparkling in her eyes. I abandoned her. Colm squeezed her shoulders. We don't see it like that. Why not? You needed help, and you let us help by caring for Petal, while you sorted yourself out. Wulf nodded. We're honoured you let us care for your daughter for a little while. Petal's mother dropped onto the chair Wulf had vacated, as though she'd just lost the use of her legs. Wulf faced her. If you want her back, I don't blame you, but any time you want us to help, you just say the word. She's become very precious. He glanced around. To us all. You're being so kind. Her voice was so low it was barely audible. Why are you being so kind to me? Wulf set Petal carefully in her arms. Mother and daughter looked at each other for the first time in a week. It's not hard to be kind, Wulf stated, with the honesty that made Colm glad to be the man's friend. There's nothing wrong in asking for help. Petal's mother fumbled the bottle, then got it settled. I didn't ask for help. I left Petal and ran. Wulf set a hand on her arm. You asked for help the only way you knew how, and it's all turned out well. You're among friends now. The thin woman looked up. Johann and Geraldine and Colm all met her gaze and nodded confirmation of Wulf's promise. Wulf smiled. We all know Petal. What's your name? Arana. It was barely a whisper. She looked down at her daughter, sucking hungrily at her bottle. It's lovely to meet you, Arana. I'm Wulf, this is Colm, and Petal's fan club is Johann and Geraldine, although several other members are around here somewhere. Thank you, she said huskily. Thank you for looking after Petal. I'll never be able to repay you. No payment needed, Wulf assured her. He smiled. They do say it takes a village to raise a child, and that's what Petal has now. He paused, then added, Will be your village too, if you want. Arana gave a watery smile, looking down at her daughter. She met Wulf's steady gaze. I'd like that. No, I'd love that. That was Lost and Found by Katy Haye. Thanks for listening.